Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as I want to sort of look at how we look at LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and Steph Curry coming out of these Olympics, because obviously as their careers are coming to an end, we are starting to get to the point. Everybody knows that typically the careers of players get looked at a little bit more fondly over time, but at the same time as well, we can be a little bit overreactionary in the present and put people in conversations that they don't necessarily deserve to be a part of. And specifically, I want to start here by talking about Steph Curry, because especially after everything that just went down, the way that Curry was able to shut it down at the end of the gold medal game and scoring those 12 points within the span of less than 3 minutes, it was unbelievable. And I really do feel like Curry it's probably these three in general. At least, obviously, I'm a little bit biased because I didn't get to grow up watching the Michael Jordans, Larry Birds, Julius Ervings, Kareems, any of those. But when Steph Curry is physically on and he's feeling it, I don't know if aesthetically there is a more appealing player to watch than Curry when he's just hitting these off balance, fading away, ridiculous shots. Now, Kevin Durant is also one of those players that, just such an ethical hooper when you talk about the pull-ups of just there's nothing anybody can do to stop them. And LeBron is in the conversation as well, but Curry takeover just makes me feel something different as well, the way that those three-pointers are just able to fly. And there's definitely a case to be made for him being in the greatest point guard of all time. Now, again, I want to acknowledge ahead of the time, before we get into any of these conversations, that I can do my research and everything, but I never experienced Magic Johnson or any of these other historical players in real time to the point where I know that I'm not the most qualified for this type of a debate. But at the same time, you look at the overall accomplishments, and I do think that Curry, is going to be really approaching that top 10 players of all time conversation off of what we did. Now, him adding a gold medal to his collection, it really was, for the most part, outside of a Defensive Player of the Year award, which was never really going to be in the cards for him. Outside of that, Curry had pretty much every accolade that you could ask for until this gold medal, and now that that's done, it feels like he's checked pretty much every box. But I think that also, again, when you just look at the skill of Steph Curry and sort of what it means and how it transcends, and for whatever it's worth, there's always this adage about if they are truly special, you can't tell the game, the story of the game of basketball without him. And I think that Steph Curry is going to go down as one of the most influential players in NBA history. And maybe it's just a fact of the matter, eventually teams were going to get smart to the fact that the three-point shot is just so much more valuable, and that it is a way to sort of elevate your game. That maybe it's just the fact that Curry was sort of the first of the bunch, but regardless, he was the first. And not just that, but it's not like he came in and just became, a really good shooter and made people aware of it. He was the greatest shooter of all time and just absolutely burst onto the scene. It became exponential, the amount of three-pointers that were being attempted on a regular basis, what is and isn't considered a good shot. And Curry is going to pretty much be the exact line of demarcation of when the NBA started fully implementing, the full spread offense a little bit in a similar light, turned into the death a little bit of, traditional post bigs, even more so than that, the post bigs, but also the four spot, where you used to kind of have two post guys in your center and your power forward. That just does not fly anymore in the NBA. And for whatever it's worth, I have been vocal at times about the Cleveland Cavaliers, where both very talented players, would probably be an absolute force if, that combination was in the NBA together 20 or so years ago, and now it just doesn't fly. And it really is because of Steph Curry. And I think that, again, he both benefited and was hurt from the idea that he played with Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green and all of these different Hall of Famers throughout his career, where it propelled him to be able to play on the biggest stage, but nobody wants to give Curry credit for 2017 and 2018 because Kevin Durant was probably the better player at the same time. He was probably the better player on that roster at the time, at least in my opinion. That's still debatable, but it was also still Steph's team at the end of the day. And that was very clear when, Kevin Durant was sort of pushed out by Draymond Green. And Steph was also just so selfish from Draymond at that point. I know Draymond's done so much for the Warriors, but I also do feel like at the same time, just watching these games, and again, I'm not opposed whatsoever to the fact that Kevin Durant left Golden State, because from a pure basketball watching standpoint, such a cool combination between the two of them. It was just so unfair, though, that I'm glad it came to an end, but again, if rooting interests just weren't a thing whatsoever, a pure basketball enjoyer, I mean, watching Kevin Durant and Steph Curry play together was sort of a dream. And it was a dream because Curry also was so willing to accept the reduced shot attempts. And he was just, it became a point where, not every star player would have been able to make that type of a sacrifice and be okay with it. And KD ends up winning both of the finals MVPs, which both of them rightfully so, but somehow that makes it look bad for Curry that he was a part of championship teams, but he wasn't the best player, even though Kevin Durant also in that conversation for the top 10, 15 best basketball players in history. So it's a weird dichotomy of all of it. And I feel like, I don't know, I'm just coming out of these Olympics reflecting on the legacies that these players had. And again, it's just a natural understanding that when you are great, you're going to face criticism. And that's totally fair. I still think that Kevin Durant, to this day, as excellent as he is, and I don't think he gets enough credit, that yes, LeBron was, the best player in the league for a lot of years. Kevin Durant was never, it's not like LeBron was ever on his own atmosphere and, uncontested. That was definitely a possibility for a couple years, but, once you start getting into 2013, I think was KD's first MVP year, 14, along those lines, like KD was neck and neck with LeBron, but unfortunately for KD as well, doesn't have the championship as really the sole guy without Steph Curry also. So it's so weird how that relationship between him and Curry both sort of bake into one another that kind of harms it, even though the fact that, they made the greatest basketball team of all time. And it is just so much more contested because people hated it, and I understand why, but I don't think that you can use them playing together as a knock on the types of basketball players they were, the influence they had on the game, and where they sort of stand alongside one another all time. Like Kevin Durant probably he will not, from a public perception standpoint, get the credit for those championships that maybe he deserves. I also understand from a pure competitor standpoint, I understand, again, the purism of watching basketball. It was kind of a no-brainer move for him to go sign with the Warriors, but considering they just blew the lead to them, 3-1 lead in the Western Conference Finals, it was one of the softer moves and it's going to be remembered that way in NBA history. But again, if you take emotions out of it, it's like Kevin Durant's options at that point, it was to stay in OKC, which would have been a valid, choice for him. Him and Russ would have been in competition for winning the finals again next year. The Celtics were reportedly on the table during that offseason. The Wizards, for him to go home with a John Wall and Brad Beal. But you look at all of those other destinations and sort of how they aged from there. Again, it was kind of a no-brainer move for just the pure enjoyment of basketball for KD to sign with the Warriors. And it's always going to be held over the top of really the two of them combined. I'd say more so KD, since Curry has the other rings without him as well. But I mean, man, this is just such a special era in NBA history with these three players. And again, getting to watch all of them close out with one another and have this sort of last moment. Again, we'll see, maybe KD makes that return trying to take home gold medal number 5, which would be ridiculous. But it would be especially ridiculous considering at that point, that's 20 years of, and LeBron obviously doing the same thing at 39 years old. He just won his 4th and was the MVP. So, LeBron, I understand it's a very similar thing, but Kevin Durant, it's more so the willingness from him that he, again, people say that he ducked competition by going to the Warriors, but the dude loves basketball, and I don't know. I think that I just have such a great respect for him, even if he made a very unpopular move when he did sign with the Warriors. But sort of just threw a lot of different legacy conversation things out there. Let me know in the comments section whether or not you think I'm being, too... I know that, again, I'm defending some moves here that are going down as some of the most popular things to ever happen in the game of basketball. So if you think I'm too defensive of it, let me know in the comments section and let me know why. But again, I'm just feeling nostalgic right now. I'm feeling like I'm really appreciating everything that we were able to just witness with these players, and definitely think it's going to be a tournament that I'm going to remember as the final goodbye for these 3 stars. But we also had this weekend, while the Olympics were concluding, we did have the first week of preseason action from the NFL. Some of the first looks of the rookie first-round quarterbacks. So we're going to be diving into how each of them performed in their debut, what you can take away from that, and more. But first, a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.